I'd been counting down to New Year's Eve alone in my small apartment on the edge of town. My roommates had gone home for the holidays, leaving me with silence, textbooks, and an overdue assignment. The building was old, tucked behind a long, dark country road. The kind of place where the hallways smelled like damp carpet and stale cigarette smoke. I didn't mind being alone. I thought it would be peaceful, quiet enough to finally get some work done and maybe watch the fireworks on TV without being crushed in a crowd. Around 7:30 p.m., I was heating a frozen pizza when I heard a knock on the door. Heavy. Insistent. My heart skipped. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the peephole. A man in a dark police uniform stood there, tall and solid, his face mostly hidden under the brim of his hat. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm but firm. "May I come in?" I hesitated. I don't think." "David Miller?" he interrupted. That was me. My stomach tightened. "Yes, why?" "I'm investigating an incident in the area," he said, eyes scanning the hallway. "We need to talk. Now." Something about him felt wrong. Not the uniform. Not even the authority. It was the way he didn't blink. The way he seemed to know where I had been before I even stepped outside. Against my instincts, I followed him into the hallway. He didn't ask me to sit. He didn't read my rights. He just led me to the stairwell and motioned toward his car, a beat-up SUV with tinted windows. No sirens, no markings. Nothing official. "Get in," he said. I froze. The hair on my arm stood up. Something was wrong. I think there's been a mistake," I stammered. He didn't answer. The door swung open, and I felt a sudden, cold realization. My apartment had been compromised. My neighbor, the quiet guy down the hall, Arthur, had always seemed harmless. The one who waved awkwardly in the hallway. But over the past months, I had noticed odd things. Small movements in the vents. He faint scent of someone else when I came home late. Photos that seemed to catch me unawares. All the signs I ignored. The SUV door slammed behind me, and we drove into the countryside. The lights of town disappeared. The roads became rough, gravelly, winding through fields I didn't recognize. Every time I tried to speak, he shushed me, reminding me that I was being monitored. That night, under the cover of New Year's fireworks and the distraction of celebrations miles away, I realized this was more than a prank, more than a fake arrest. I was part of a game I didn't understand, a surveillance operation I had stumbled into by being alone and visible. The SUV came to a stop near an abandoned farmhouse surrounded by a rusted fence and overgrown fields. Flashlights swept the yard in systematic, deliberate motions. I realized they weren't just patrolling, they were marking me, mapping my escape routes, testing my reactions. The officer turned to me. "You've been watched for months," he said. "Someone's been preparing." I didn't understand at first. Then it clicked, Arthur. My neighbor. The man who had seemed lonely and harmless. The one who invited me over for casual dinners, who I had nodded to in passing. Every observation, every small disappearance of mine, every time I thought the apartment was empty, he had been watching. Preparing. I tried to run the moment the door opened, but my panic wasn't enough. He grabbed my arm, firm and unyielding. The flashlight beams crisscrossed over me as I dashed into the brush, stumbling into the tall grass and mud. I could hear the officer shouting behind me, but there were too many shadows, too many obstacles. My hands scraped on roots and rocks, my lungs burned, and I'd barely kept my footing. I stumbled into a narrow drainage ditch, half hidden by reeds. Pressing myself into the mud, I tried to quiet my breathing. The flashlight passed overhead. I didn't move. I could hear murmurs from the farmhouse, voices analyzing my position, estimating my survival time. Hours must have passed. Or minutes. Time was meaningless in that darkness. Eventually, the voices faded, retreating back toward the farmhouse. I waited until the first pale light of dawn touched the horizon, then crawled out of the ditch and ran. I didn't stop until the outline of the main road appeared. A passing driver stopped, took me to the nearest gas station, and called the police. When the authorities arrived, they found the farmhouse abandoned. No SUV. No officer. No one. But in Arthur's apartment, they discovered hidden vents, photos of me, sleeping, cooking, watching TV. Months of surveillance, meticulously recorded. They never found him. Never found the accomplice. Nothing connected the farmhouse or the SUV to any real operation. I moved out immediately, back to a city where anonymity might save me. But every New Year's Eve, I check the vents, the shadows, the hallways. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I see a figure in the distance, watching. Waiting. I escaped that night, but the truth remains unresolved. Someone was tracking me. Someone was ready. And I still don't know why they let me go. I had never liked New Year's Eve. The noise, the forced excitement, the way everyone acted like the calendar flipping meant something had truly changed. So when my longtime friend Caleb suggested we spend it somewhere quiet, far from crowds and cities, I agreed without hesitation. We'd grown up together, survived college together, and lately he'd been distant, withdrawn in a way that felt heavier than stress. I thought a drive through the countryside might bring him back to himself. The town we chose barely qualified as a place. One gas station, a diner with flickering lights, and fields that swallowed the road the moment your headlights fell short. There was no cell service, no traffic, and no reason for anyone to be there unless they wanted to disappear for a while. Fireworks popped faintly in the distance, echoing like dull cracks across the empty land. Inside the gas station, the clerk barely looked at me as I paid. When I turned to ask Caleb what he wanted, the clerk's eyes flicked past me, then froze. "You here by yourself?" he asked quietly. I laughed, nodding toward Caleb. "No. With my friend." The clerk swallowed hard and slid the receipt across the counter with shaking fingers. Beneath it was a folded slip of paper. "Don't stay past midnight." I asked Caleb if he noticed how strange that was, but he didn't respond. He was staring out the window, eyes fixed on the dark line of trees beyond the pumps, jaw tight. We walked toward a low hill overlooking the fields as midnight crept closer. The fireworks were brighter now, distant bursts painting the horizon in weak color. That's when I noticed something I couldn't explain. People passed us, locals heading somewhere, bundled in coats, but none of them reacted to Caleb. Not a glance. Not a pause. One woman brushed directly against him and apologized to me instead. I slowed, my pulse rising. "Do you see that?" I asked. Caleb stopped walking. "You're noticing now," he said. "Noticing what?" He looked at me, tired eyes reflecting the fireworks. "That I don't belong here." I told him to cut it out. That it wasn't funny. But something about him felt wrong, washed out, like the light didn't quite land on him properly. Engines roared nearby. Then more. Flashlights swept across the fields, methodical and low. Caleb grabbed my wrist. His grip was cold, too cold for the weather. "They're starting early," he said. "Who?" "People who erase mistakes." A man stepped out of the darkness, his voice sharp and controlled. "You shouldn't be here." He wasn't looking at Caleb. Only at me. Fireworks thundered overhead, covering the sound of boots moving through tall grass. More lights appeared. More engines. Caleb took a step back. "If they catch you with me, you won't leave." "What are you talking about?" I whispered. He gave a small, sad smile. "You finally paid attention. That's the problem." And then he ran, straight into the fields, leaving me with no choice but to follow. The frozen ground tore at my lungs as I ran, boots crunching loudly behind Caleb's silent steps. Flashlights sliced closer through the dark, voices barking clipped commands I couldn't make out over the fireworks still echoing across the countryside. That's when I noticed it. My footprints carved deep into the frost. Caleb's left nothing at all. Panic tightened in my chest, but I kept moving. We reached a collapsing barn crouched at the edge of the fields, its boards sagging like tired bones. Caleb slipped inside through a broken panel. I followed. The air inside felt stale and wrong, heavy with old paper and rust. A ladder descended through a hole in the floor, disappearing into darkness. "This is where everything changed," Caleb said quietly. I shook my head. "You're standing right here." He met my eyes. "Not the way you think." He explained it in pieces. Years ago, the town had been part of something unofficial, operations that moved through rural areas where oversight was thin and people didn't ask questions. Accidents happened. Witnesses became liabilities. Records vanished. Caleb had stumbled onto it by accident. Asked the wrong questions. Followed the wrong road. "They didn't need to hurt me," he said. "They just made sure no one acknowledged me anymore. No reports. No follow-ups. I became easy to ignore." Outside, voices grew closer. The barn doors rattled. "They can't erase you," I said. "They already did," he replied. "You're just late to realizing it." Flashlights burst through the gaps in the walls. Someone shouted my name. Caleb backed toward the ladder. "If you follow me down there, you'll disappear too. Officially." "What happens to you?" He exhaled slowly. "I fade. Memory does the rest." The fireworks reached their finale, thunderous enough to drown out everything else. The men stormed inside. Caleb looked at me one last time. "Don't come back next year." He descended the ladder, and the darkness swallowed him. When they found me, I was alone. They said I'd been trespassing. That no one else had been with me. That stress can do strange things to the mind. By sunrise, the town looked ordinary again. I left without arguing. Since then, every New Year's Eve, I receive a voicemail from a blocked number. No words. Just wind, distant fireworks, and the sound of breathing. A reminder that some places don't need to threaten you. They just wait for you to forget. I chose the countryside because I thought it would be quiet. Crowds make my skin crawl. Too many eyes, too many chances to be noticed. So when New Year's Eve came around, I rented a small cabin near a nearly abandoned rural town, one diner, a closed-down factory, and fields that stretched farther than the headlights could reach. I planned to spend the night alone, headphones on, waiting for midnight to pass like any other minute. At 11:20 p.m., I heard a knock. Not loud. Not urgent. Just firm enough to demand attention. I froze. No one knew I was here. I hadn't told friends, hadn't posted online, hadn't even spoken to the cabin owner except through automated messages. I waited, hoping the knock would fade into nothing. It came again. I cracked the door an inch. A police officer stood on the porch, tall and broad, his uniform immaculate despite the mud around the cabin. His flashlight was off, but his eyes were fixed on me with unsettling focus. "Evening," he said. "You're cutting it close." "Close to what?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "The new year. That should have been harmless. It wasn't." My heart started racing anyway. He asked for my name. Against my better judgment, I gave it. The moment I did, his expression changed, like a confirmation light had switched on. "There you are," he said. "I need you to step outside." I felt sick. "Why?" "There's been an incident nearby," he replied. "You matched the description." That didn't make sense. I hadn't been anywhere. I told him that. He nodded, like he'd heard it all before. "I just need to verify a few things." I stepped onto the porch. The cold air bit into my lungs. That's when I noticed there was no patrol car. No engine noise. Just darkness behind him. His radio crackled. Static. Then a voice too distorted to understand. "Change of plans?" the officer muttered. My chest tightened. "Am I in trouble?" He looked at me for a long moment. "That depends on how cooperative you are." Fireworks boomed faintly in the distance. Midnight was approaching. He asked me to walk with him toward the tree line, saying his vehicle was parked nearby. Every instinct screamed not to go, but fear locked my feet into motion. As we walked, I noticed something else: lights in the distance. Flashlights. Moving slowly through the fields, methodical, organized. Not searching wildly. Sweeping. "You running some kind of drill out here?" I asked. The officer didn't answer. We reached a dirt road where an unmarked SUV waited, engine idling. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. The officer opened the back door. That's when I noticed his badge. It didn't have a number. I stepped back. "I want to go back to the cabin." He grabbed my arm. Not violently. Casually. Like he expected no resistance. "No," he said quietly. "You don't." The fireworks grew louder. Midnight hit. Cheers echoed from the distant town. And as the SUV door closed behind me, I realized no one would hear me scream. The inside of the SUV smelled like chemicals and old fabric. The seats were stripped down, no logos, no markings. My hands weren't cuffed, which somehow made it worse. The officer climbed into the passenger seat. The driver never turned around. We drove. Past the fields. Past the factory. Deeper into roads that didn't appear on my GPS, which had lost signal entirely. I tried to speak, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. "You weren't supposed to notice us," the officer finally said. "Notice what?" I whispered. He glanced back at me. "Patterns. Timing. Faces that don't change year after year." I didn't understand, and I think that frustrated him. He sighed. "Every new year, people disappear out here," he said. "Not many. Just enough to keep things running." "What things?" He smiled. "Operations that don't survive daylight." The SUV slowed near a cluster of floodlights illuminating a fenced-off compound. Shipping containers. Temporary buildings. Men and women in dark clothing moving with purpose. Surveillance cameras rotated smoothly, scanning the perimeter. I was shaking uncontrollably. "This was a mistake," I said. "I won't tell anyone. That's what makes you useful." The driver finally spoke. His voice was calm. "Practiced. You weren't chosen at random. You're observant. Quiet. Easy to isolate." The officer opened the door and motioned for me to get out. That's when the power cut. Every light went dead at once. Confusion erupted. Shouts. Footsteps running. In the chaos, the officer hesitated, just long enough. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I ran into the darkness, through brush and mud, branches tearing at my clothes. Behind me, flashlights snapped on, scanning wildly. "Don't let him reach the road," someone shouted. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I hid beneath an overturned drainage culvert, pressing myself into freezing water and rust. They searched for hours. I heard them talking, about protocols, losses, exposure. About how midnight covered mistakes. Eventually, the voices faded. At dawn, I crawled out and walked until I found a highway. A passing driver took me to the nearest town. I told the police everything. They found nothing. No compound. No SUV. No record of officers assigned to the area. Just one thing. Every New Year since, I receive a message from an unknown number at exactly midnight. No text. Just a live location pin. Always somewhere rural. Always moving. As if they're reminding me they didn't lose me. They let me go.